So hello everybody and welcome to this edition of the eLearning Network webinars. I'm really pleased to introduce Stephen and Steve, who are going to talk to us today about content curation. So let me hand straight over to you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us, Joan, and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining the session. Stephen here, let me just share my screen and we will get started here. Let me know if you're seeing that okay. Put it into full screen mode, that would be helpful.
Yep, that's working fine.
Fantastic. Just perfect start. Let me just come back to the beginning here. Ignore the spoiler alerts. So we're here to talk about getting more engagement in your LMS or your learning platform, what that means, why it matters, how curated content can help you with that, and some tips and examples to get you started. Quick introduction from us. This is myself, Stephen Walsh here, and my colleague Steve Rayson. Great to see so many familiar faces on the webinar today. So we've both been in this industry for a little while, probably 20 odd years or so, and not all of them odd, but a good few of them have been, and co-founders of Kineo and Bosumo, and now AndersPink. So great to be on board, and thanks for joining us as well today, Steve. So let's just jump right in, because there's a lot we want to get through with you today here. First of all, I just wanted to back up, and I was really interested. I'm sure many of you follow Josh Bersin as a great commentator and analyst of our industry. He wrote something just here this month, which I think was just a great kind of potted history of where we've come from in this industry and where we're headed. And it certainly made me feel, I don't know if nostalgic is the right word, but you know, memorable of the late 90s, early 2000s, when really we were all thinking about, well, what do we do to get engagement? Well, we build e-learning courses, and often they were 40, 60-minute courses at that stage. And we put them on an LMS, and the LMS is basically the repository of courses. And that's, I think, where it was for quite a long time, and in a lot of cases where it still is. But things are evolving. We're moving into talent management territory, moving, you know, terms like blended learning and social learning, which now feel like they've been around for a while, but we're cutting edge at the time, into starting to think about continuous learning and looking beyond 70-20-10, thinking resources, thinking more about different types of experiences that don't just fit into fixed and formal 10% structures, to where we are now. And I really like Josh's term here about learning in the flow of work, recognizing that we all want everything, everywhere, wherever we're working, we want to consume content, be it mobile content, be it video content, be it curated content or articles. And the LMS, I think, to use his phrase there, becomes a little bit more invisible. We may track things in the background, but really the experience has to be wherever we need to work. So I think this whole workflow learning, if we want to talk more about engagement, we need to understand, why are we making this shift towards continuous learning in the workflow? And what does it mean for us as L&D and learning professionals trying to drive engagement with content? So why are we in this more, you know, grab and go, take content on the move experience right now? I think there are a couple of trends that are driving it. Number one, and if your experience is like mine, you're certainly feeling this, which is time. Time is the biggest challenge that we all have to learning, and the biggest challenge we have to engagement. Again, earlier this month, LinkedIn did a great workplace learning trends survey. They found that the number one reason that people feel held back from learning is because they don't have time for it. They don't have time to set aside an hour, or certainly not a day or a week, to attend some formal experience. They need to consume it on the fly. So when we think about engagement, we have to think about the time commitment we're asking people to make. And we're talking about minutes rather than hours, I think, in terms of driving people's engagement and learning. Jane Hart's research recently, her workplace learning survey, bore this out, where learners value short resources a lot more than they do longer and formal training experiences. So in asking people to rank, well, what do they find most useful or essential, as you can see, daily work experiences, learning on the job, sharing knowledge with your team, web search, professional networks and communities are at the top. At the bottom here, we've got classroom training, conferences, and e-learning. But I think, ironically, these bottom ones are still where a lot of the expenditure, a lot of the effort in creating learning goes into. Whereas what people value is actually small, curated content that's available on the fly. So I think we need to think about a shift in priorities to support what people actually want and need to help in their workflow learning experience. Slightly older research now, but still bears this out from Towards Maturity from 2016. 60% of people saying they learn more from external sources than formal courses. 88% want a self-directed learning experience. 70% find external sources essentially very useful, much higher percent than free learning. And the more senior in the organization, the higher up that percent goes. So courses start to fade a little bit further back in terms of relevance compared to resources. And then we've seen this shift, a phrase that will be not new to any of you, I'm sure, micro learning. But this to me is about more is less. It's about breaking down courses, or breaking away from courses, and thinking about what do I need right now to help me do something, get on with my job. And to use Josh Burson's phrase, we shouldn't be worried about trying to get people addicted and spending more and more time on learning platforms. Engagement is really about providing the right content at the right moment, helping people to use it and get on with their jobs. So we see this drive towards micro 2-minute, often video-based or podcast-based resources that are really about answering a question to help me get on with whatever I need to do. Not instead of macro learning. Of course, we need both. Of course, we still need structured learning experiences to take us to a certain point of competency, but they're not enough on their own. So playing to that time issue is really important. Do ask questions. We're keeping an eye on the Q&A and chat. So if you've got questions, comments, disagree, we'd love to hear it. Just keep the comments coming, and we'll jump in and look at those. So time is a big issue. The other one I think is more about all of us staying relevant. This whole idea that what we learned last week, last year when we were in college, that becomes less relevant over time. Our skills are assets. They depreciate if we don't keep investing in them. So it's up to us to stay relevant. It's become something of an imperative to our careers, to our employability, to continuously learn. So if something helps us to stay ahead or to stay ahead of the competition, it's by default engaging, in my view. The Economist called this out last year. Great report. If you haven't seen it, it's free on their website, where they noted that lifelong learning, continuous learning is a new economic imperative. Vast majority of people realize they will need to learn new skills throughout their working lives. Things don't stand still. The younger you are, the more relevant that is. We just do not know what we are going to need to be expert in to survive and thrive as the economy continues to change under our feet. Tom Hood called this out as a kind of almost an arms race equation. He said that on one hand, you've got the rate of change in the world. On the other hand, you've got your rate of learning. And if your rate of learning stays ahead of the rate of change, you will be a winner. And especially if you stay ahead of the rate of competition. So while that can be slightly stressful to think about, I think it is true, is you need to think about the balance between how quickly are you learning versus how much is changing in your industry, whatever topic we're in, and learning and digital learning is no exception to that. So I want to pause there and just ask a question. I think, Joan, you've got a poll set up for this, if I'm right. Just to think, well, we're learning professionals. We should be, shining examples of staying on top of trends, continuously learning for ourselves. How do we do that? So I'd love to hear your feedback on where your go-to sources for continuously learning. Is it the LMS, the learning platform? Is it checking social feeds like LinkedIn or Twitter? Is it just searching Google, YouTube, elsewhere? Is it following, subscribing, blogs, sites, newsletters? None of the above. Let's hear your answer. So give me a second to get some voting coming in there.
Or maybe all of the above as well.
Possible.
I'm thinking I'd take a lot of those. Possibly not the first one, but all of the rest.
Can you see the results coming in, or
just come out of my full view? Steve, can you see those results?
No, I can't see them, but
okay. Well, just give me a sec, and then I'll publish them.
Okay.
But I mean, people can also obviously put comments into chat as well.
Yeah,
please do. And we're looking. We got some.
Stop it now and share the results.
Right.
Okay.
There you go. So, okay. So the LMS is perhaps not the place of choice, it seems, for staying up to date on the latest trending content. Social and Google and blog sites very close. So Google dominating, but not much in it. So I'm going to take from that you're looking in more than one place, but a place where you're not looking is the LMS and the learning platform. And I think that's a challenge and an opportunity to us as learning professionals, is how can we drive up that engagement with the learning platform so it becomes a place where you look for new content as well. Really interesting and not surprising, I think, to see social and Google at the top of the list for people. And we do all want to stay on top of trends, and Googling and searching for content is a vital way of doing it. I think there are some challenges with doing it. First of all, it can be an inefficient way to do it. This IDC stat is an old one, but I think it's still a good one. If anything, I imagine this number has gone up, which is knowledge workers spend 9.5 hours a week, so a quarter of a typical work week, if anyone really does work 40 hours anymore, looking for information and not necessarily finding it. 25% of people can't find what they're looking for. And a very small proportion of organizations are saying, well, let's do something about this. Let's structure this content for them. And the challenge, as you all know, when you browse content, is the signal to noise, is finding good, relevant content. And the time, that 9.5 hours, a lot of it is spent looking at articles on a topic and realizing this isn't really what I was looking for. And maybe I've read a third of it, or I've watched 5 minutes of a TED talk and it's not for me. That's wasted time. So how do we make that time more efficient? Good stuff from from Basumo here around how popular topics get saturated with content. So Steve, I know you did the research on this, but Bitcoin obviously been trending, and as prices started to change, and as things changed last December, 40,000 articles were published a week on Bitcoin. So if you were trying to create a course on Bitcoin or just stay up to date on Bitcoin, you're up against it in terms of tracking the most relevant content. Mark Schaefer called this out as a phrase. He said, you know, there is just, we all know there's just too much content out there. He called it content shock, which is this idea of there's just more content out there than we have the human capacity to consume, even on niche topics, Bitcoin, or even narrow topics as well. There's just more produced than we can ever hope for. So we have this kind of perfect storm where we're short on time. We know we need to continuously learn. When we go looking for content, there's too much of it out in the wider web, whether you're tracking through Twitter or flicking through a LinkedIn feed or just browsing for content. Then when we go to the place in the organization that's supposed to be the home for learning, there's not enough of the right content in there. So you all know, as we saw in that chart from Josh Burson, the LMS has traditionally been the home of formal courses and resources. It's where you make stuff and you put it in. And that's vital, as I said, it's for getting you to a certain point of knowledge, but it's not enough. It's not paying attention to those 40,000 articles on Bitcoin or the 8 articles on the niche topic that you want your audience to stay up to date. You try to create a course about these things, they go out of date quickly because new content is published every day. Does that mean the LMS is dead? I know Con is on the line and he will vigorously defend the LMS, and he's absolutely right. The LMS is not dead. Whatever frothy analyst stat you want to look at, and there's a lot of them to choose from, the LMS market continues to grow and is projected to be, you know, upwards of 19 billion by 2022. So learning platforms and LMSs continue to be vital for organizations, but they need to change. They need to be reborn to be relevant in this workflow learning mentality that we're in now, to increase their relevance and to increase engagement within it. That's, you know, supporting that. 38% of people looking to improve the user experience, 28% looking to change their core learning platform, 40% planning on replacing the LMS, but they're not doing like for like when they're looking to improve the experience. They're looking to do something else. And you know, there are a few buzzwords floating around at the moment. I think we'll end up settling on the right phrase or phrases for these things, but one that's caught my eye is this idea of a learning experience platform, or LEP or LXP, depending on how you want to abbreviate it. To call out just some of the differences, I think, where we're seeing this market going. LMS is traditionally closed course repositories. If you want to update something in there, it's typically an admin that needs to add something, edit something to bring it up to date. And engagement, as we've traditionally talked about it, has really been about marketing. It's been about launching an LMS, doing a marketing campaign internally, telling people, hey, go here, check it out, it's great. But then after that big splash in the launch, it starts to become less relevant over time because it's not kept up to date, because keeping them up to date is time consuming and it's a lot of effort, and it's in the hands of a small number of people. Flipping over to LEPs, they generally are more open and integrated. They're generally bringing in content from other sources or integrating into other tools or platforms, often with APIs. Their focus is on, yes, courses, of course, but also continuous learning resources. So bringing in that flow of content from whatever social feeds or whatever searches you want to do, and staying up to date automatically as a result of doing that. And their engagement is more about, how do we get this content to the right people at the right time in the workflow, even if they're not actually touching the platform, even if we're delivering this content into another platform where they're already hanging out or doing their work. So that's a direction we see things going in. This is where we think content curation plays a key role in driving that engagement. So curating content to support this learning in the workflow and to drive better learning experiences through curated content. You can curate many definitions of content curation. Two here, Roy Babgavas at the first one and Don Taylor underneath, both effectively saying the same thing in slightly different ways. It's about finding content, organizing it, and then sharing it on a continuous basis so that it's easier for people. So it's trying to, I guess, absorb some of that content shock for people, is saying, we don't want you to read 40,000 articles in Bitcoin. Let's help you find the 10, 8, 6 that are most relevant to us as a learning audience at this specific moment in time, and let's keep those up to date. Easy to say in theory. How do you do it in practice? we're big fans at AndersPink of what Harold Jarke has said around seek, sense, share. Now, he conceived of this model in terms of personal knowledge mastery, but I think it's really relevant for how we curate content for ourselves and for other people as well. So just to break down these steps, seeking content. Seeking content is all about finding relevant, timely, useful content for ourselves, of course, but also for our audiences. So 3 tips around that. Choose a target audience. I would say look at the organizations that you're working with, look at the learners that you're supporting. Who really needs to stay up to date with continuously updated insights from the wider web? Often audiences that we see with AndersPink and with other curation platforms is sales teams. Sales teams always want to know what is happening in my sector, what is happening in my clients, what's happening in my prospects, what's happening in my industry, what's happening in my competitors. Hungry for information that they can use to convert and close and win. So sales audiences are a great place to start with content curation. Managers as well, researchers, racing teams. Start with one audience and then talk to them. Really like this phrase from Jane Hart, be a content concierge. Say to them, look, if I could bring in content for you from various different sites and sources, what would you want to see? Are there specific sites that you trust? Are there specific blogs that you always read? Are there people on Twitter that you really value? Let me bring them together for you. And then where do you want this content and how often do you want it? Do you want a weekly email? Do you want a daily feed? Talking to them and then making it specific for them will help to be efficient in seeking. Once you have that information, what you don't want to do is then say, all right, I'm just going to have to Google this every day for everybody forever. Unless that's what you want to do for the rest of your life. There are better ways of doing that because you can use tools. One of them ours, but there are many tools out there to make it more efficient. So when you're seeking content, use algorithms to help aggregate and bring the best content to the surface for you and for your audience. Once you've got that content, I quite like this phrase that somebody else used, which is machines can aggregate for you, but only humans can really curate, because the real value, I think, in content curation is how you make sense of content. So you have to make sense of it for yourself. You need to read it, watch the video, listen to the podcast and say, well, what did I learn from this? What are the takeaways from this? And who would this help? Who in my organization would value this content? And then add a comment. And it doesn't have to be a 500-word essay. It can be a 30-second insight saying, this is what I thought of this. I think you'll find this useful. Or say something provocative. Here's something our competitors are doing. What should we be doing about this? Get a conversation going. We all have social networks and social communities. Provoke people by starting a conversation, starting a debate with some curated content, and then make connections. So build a narrative. You can take 3 or 4 pieces of content that you've curated and say, if you look at these together, they complement what we've been saying as a team already, and build a knowledge base over time. So make sense of content for yourself and then for other people as well. And then, of course, there's no point doing any of that if people can't see it. So you've got to share it. You've got to share it wherever people will find it useful. So you need to think about the channels and platforms. That might be your LMS, it might be your learning platform, but it might also be Slack, or it might be your SharePoint, or it might be Jive, it might be somewhere else. Maybe you need to put it where people are already naturally hanging out and working, and that may be in more than one place. As you said in your response to the poll, you look for content in multiple places. Our learners are the same, so we can put it in multiple places to help get access for them. APIs and integrations make that easier. So in the way that Slack, open it up and you can plug in different tools and platforms to bring content in. We need to be doing that with our learning experience platforms as well. And then I think it's really about building a habit, as those definitions for curation said. This is not something that you do once. All of these subjects continue to change over time. You need to build a habit. Ideally, invest 10 minutes a day is something that I try to do. So I try to anchor it to, after first cup of coffee in the morning, read 3 articles, watch 1 video. If you do 10 minutes a day over a year, that adds up to a week's worth of continuous learning, which is quite an investment to make in yourself and for your teams as well. So think about that seek, sense, share model as a way to just make that curation happen. What we try to do at AndersPink is we try to make that a little bit easier. We try to make it easier to curate content with some filters, then use the API to push that content wherever you want it to display, and then make it easier for end users to consume it. So I'm going to hand over to Steve to just show you a little bit about how that works in more detail. So all yours, Steve.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. I'll just share my screen. How's that? You see that okay?
Yep, it's coming through all good.
Great, good. Okay, I'm going to show you just a little bit of what AndersPink does, but then more importantly, just show you how we integrate it with learning platforms, because you really want to deliver the learning and the content to where your learners are, not make them go to yet another platform that they won't necessarily log into. So on screen, you're seeing the AndersPink app. You can just go to this online and create your own briefings. We call them briefings. It's really a feed of information, but you can create a briefing about anything you want. In essence, we crawl the web every day. We're crawling millions of sites every day, and we'll bring back content that you request. So I just show you how you set up a briefing. So I'll go over here on the left and click Create Briefing. And you've got a number of ways you can do it. We can start by picking topics. So let's just do something simple. So I just type in articles on e-learning, and I'll just get a preview of articles on e-learning. Probably not overly helpful. I can add further words. So I'd say just show me articles on e-learning trends, for example. And now I just get articles on e-learning trends. I could also exclude words if I want to exclude words. So I can start to build quite a sophisticated briefing here. And I'll show you another example. So let's say I'll start with something like coaching. Actually, coaching will bring in lots of content from across the web, which is related to football and other sports, etc. So what we can do under step 4 here is limit it to certain sites. So we could just say only show content from our curated list of domains. We've curated about 6,000 business domains, which means that now we'll only get content from those business domains. And then we could filter it further saying, actually, I just want to see articles with tips about coaching. And now I've got articles with tips about coaching from business domains. But if you like particular sites, you can choose topics just from particular sites. So let's just do something else here. Let's just maybe look for articles on leadership, which is again quite wide ranging. But this time we'll limit it to just hbr.org. Maybe we like Harvard Business Review. And now we'll just see articles from Harvard Business Review about leadership. But you might have a set of 10 sites, 20 sites that you really like. So rather than having to go and check 20 sites each time, you could say, just tell me every time these sites publish articles about unconscious bias or whatever it is you happen to be talking about. So you can build, say, quite sophisticated briefings, filtering down by keywords and domains or a combination of both. You can also create a briefing by picking sources. So here we start with a different way. So we might want to say, I just want to see articles published by AndersPink.com, and we can just preview to see what those would look like. So I can say, just show me content published by these domains. I use this a lot at BuzzSumo. I've got one set up for competitor domains. So every time a competitor publishes an article, it just automatically comes into my briefing. I don't need to go away to their sites and track them. But I could also do this for Twitter users. Maybe there are Twitter users you like. So let's do Jane Hart on the Center for Learning and Performance Technologies. And we can just see the links that Jane's been sharing on Twitter. So we could do this for RSS feeds, we can do topics. So rather than start with a particular topic, what we can do is say, actually, I just want to see content that's being shared by Jane Hart and Don Taylor and eLearning Network, etc. And I can put a briefing together that way. So there are a number of different ways in which you can put together your briefing. Well, hopefully that gives you a sense, and then it just gives you that briefing. So if I just click on my content marketing briefing, this is one of my briefings, and I can go down and say, I just want to see content published in the last 3 days about content marketing, or the last 24 hours if I want. So that's how you create a briefing in AndersPink, and you can use that online. And as Con said in the chat room, you can get an email, a daily email if you want to just update that briefing. But what you really want to be able to do is to deliver that into where the learners are. So I'm just going to show you how you can take AndersPink content and put it into an LMS or an intranet or any other platform. So hopefully you can see on the screen here a simple Moodle site, so a simple learning management system. It's not the prettiest, it's just one that we've designed, but it's just taking Moodle and putting it together here. So what we've done is create a simple block where you can take AndersPink content in the form of an API, and you can bring it into your platform. So if you use Moodle or Tutor or anything Moodle based, you can do this. So I'll choose an AndersPink block. I now have an AndersPink block here, and now I'm just going to configure it. Well, at first what I can do is I'll move it into the center of the page. So let's say I move it underneath the 2 courses that are here. So I can now configure it. So I'll configure the block, and I can select a briefing. I can actually select a briefing or a save folder, which I'll come on to in a moment, which is where you save articles that you really like in AndersPink. So let's say this is a marketing course. So I want to see articles about marketing trends. So I'll call this block Marketing Trends. Maybe I have the image above the article. I'll have it in 2 columns. I'll just show 4 articles and just ones with an image, for example. And I'll save this. And then what that does is immediately it goes away and brings back relevant articles from my briefing on marketing trends. And these get updated. We update the feed about every 4 hours or so. So I can configure this. I can further configure it and say, actually, what I would also like to see is a preview of the article content. So maybe just show me the first paragraph and I can add that. So I'm now seeing not just the article, but an initial preview because maybe I want to click through and see it. So I'm bringing through, say, content from a briefing. I'll show you a different type of content we can bring through. So let's just now configure this new block. So I'm going to configure it. And maybe this time I'm going to show a saved folder. In AndersPink, you can save articles, so you can further curate from our curation. So there are 2 levels. The first level is our automated algorithms that's crawling millions of articles each day, filtering it for you based on the rules that you set up, such as keywords, domains, etc. But you can further save articles. So here, maybe I want to save articles and show articles on AI. So these are some articles about artificial intelligence that we've saved because we think they're useful. Maybe this time, actually, it's okay to just have a small image, 1 column, 5 articles is fine. I'll show an image and I'll save those changes. And now here on the right-hand side, I've got saved articles. So these are not going to update automatically. These are ones that we've saved on the right-hand side about artificial intelligence. So if you had a reading list you wanted people to read, you could do that. I'll just create another block over to the left-hand side here, and I'll configure this. And maybe this time I just want to see stuff about technology news, or actually maybe copywriting tips. Maybe there's some practical stuff I want people to see. So actually I just want to share some articles on copywriting tips. And again, I can keep it as a single column, 5 images, for example, save those changes. And now I've got on the left-hand side a feed that's constantly updated about copywriting tips. So it's just a way of keeping the learner engaged, because you may have your course there in the middle, like leadership styles or whatever it happens to be, but it's fairly static. Courses are expensive to build. They don't tend to change that often. Now with this copywriting tips block on the left-hand side, we can be updating that every day with new articles about copywriting tips, just to keep people engaged. Or it could be, this is a course about money laundering and it's got latest articles, latest news about money laundering, ways in which we want to keep people engaged with the content. So hopefully you can see, in just doing that very quickly, we've taken an LMS course which had a couple of static courses in it, and now we've added feeds which will just get updated continually. So we can bring in relevant information direct to the learner. And this doesn't need to be just in the LMS. This could be, for example, into your intranet or other sites. And Stephen's going to show you some other examples of how that works. But that's just a quick overview of how you might create content from AndersPink, feeds, and bring them in to support learning and supplement what the learner is doing, really. So, Stephen, I think you've got a couple of other examples that you want to take and show.
Yeah, that's great. And thanks everyone for all the I mean, trying to keep up with the chat conversation. Lots of great observations, comments in there as well. One that came to mind for me was somebody mentioned, it's just that personal recommendation. If someone adds a comment and says, this is a great article, that really adds a huge amount of value to it. I totally agree with that. One of the things that integration allows you to do is do that. So you can comment on an article, send that comment over with it and say, hey team, we should really check this article out. So I think that personal endorsement, that's where the real power, I think, of curation comes in. So that's available in that block as well. So yeah, so Steve, thanks for taking us through. Just to show a few other integrations and examples from a few of our clients and our partners. This one here is from Enterprise Ireland. So excuse my Dublin Irish bias, but Enterprise Ireland.
We'll forgive you.
State body here that runs training and development programs for businesses in Ireland that are trying to improve their skills or export better, etc. So with this topic called Brexit, which you may have come across, which has a lot of trending content about it and is quite important in Ireland at the moment. And I just want to show you what they've done with it. not done with Brexit, but they've done with the content they've developed. So they have two things. They have a public-facing site, which is built in WordPress, and they also have a learning program site, which is built in Moodle. This is their public-facing site where they have content on Brexit. Now they have their own user-generated or video-created content that they've made themselves on Brexit. Down at the bottom of this page, though, they have got recommended reading. This is coming straight in from the AndersPink API. So over on their AndersPink team, I'll just click into that for a moment. They've created all of these different briefings, and they've done it just the way that Steve has described there. So they've got a briefing on Brexit. They've filtered it by certain sites that are relevant to them. So Bloomberg, FT, some Irish websites as well. And then they've just said, use the API panel, send this briefing over to appear in our WordPress site and have it update automatically. So this content's from a day ago, 11 hours ago, etc. Once they've set it up, that's just happening automatically for them. So their website is constantly refreshed with relevant content about Brexit as it relates to Ireland and keeping their program up to date. They've also done this within their formal learning program. So this is a program on leadership for growth. And again, it's got what you'd expect in a learning program within Moodle. They've got course resources and assets, module content, but they've also got a trending feed of content in here, leadership development in the news. And again, exactly the same way they filtered by certain sites. McKinsey's kind of dominating this one today, but bringing through content about leadership development right inside the learning program as well. So they're getting a lot of value from that. They get great feedback because one thing that they've said to us is when someone comes to us and says, you know, we're rolling out a new program about how to export efficiently to China, they can very quickly create a briefing on that, make it very specific on sources, and then automatically generate content far quicker than if they had to build a course around that subject. So it helps them as a team of learning professionals within Enterprise Ireland stay efficient, stay up to date, and be very responsive to their internal clients and their external users as well. So that's just one example. Another example, I want to give a shout out to Paul Westlake, who's on the call today. So Kineo, great partner of ours, use AndersPink as part of their curation offer within the Totara platform. Cat Marine, part of the Caterpillar group, focused on marine technologies. They curate content around some very niche topics, and it just you can see on the screen here the types of briefings that they're making. So remote vessel technology. What I couldn't tell you about that subject, and there's tons of articles that you can read about it, but they've gone very niche in it and gone very specific to make it relevant for them. They've created multiple briefings. They've embedded it into their collaborative learning platform. So this content powers communities, powers conversations, allows people to interact, debate, have a conversation around it. And just this week is I should say 2018, not 17, Platinum Award at the LearnX Impact Award. So very proud of that piece of work. And I think a great example of how you can integrate it into other platforms. Fuse, who many of you will know, have gone a step further with this. They've integrated the ability to curate content directly into their platform. So again, this is via the AndersPink API. As you can see on the left here, they've given people the option within the Fuse platform to create briefings from around the web, filter them in the same way that Steve just showed you, and then curate them. And end users can do it, or admins can do it. So if you're running a community on the Fuse platform and you want to drop in a widget that shows what the latest content on communication skills, you can do that, and you can do it all from within their platform. And again, that enables people to share, like, interact, promote the content whatever way they want to. So fresh content coming into the platform to drive engagement every day, every hour as a result of that integration. And Unicorn, another partner of ours, I really like what they've done here, which is they have an app called Mind's Eye, which I'd really recommend checking out. It's got a series of courses in it, about 100 in total, but it also has topics that you can follow. So it allows a degree of personalization here, which is, as you can see on the left there, you can follow topics, behavioral economics, body language, budgeting, whatever you happen to be interested in. Those are briefings. Those are AndersPink briefings that they've created over on the platform, and again, through the API, integrated them into their app. Once you follow those topics, you get curated content from the web. As you can see, this one's on body language, and you get a streaming feed of content. So again, not replacing the course, but complementing it with relevant content that comes in every day. If they had to go and update these courses, 100 courses every week, obviously that would be prohibitive, but these briefings will stay fresh all the time for them and continue to evolve over time. So allowing a degree of personalization for learners as well. So those are just some examples, some suggestions where to get started. Obviously, what's right to curate to help generate engagement in your learning platform will depend on you, your organization, your learners. We've mentioned a few examples where we see use cases coming through, tracking specific developments in an industry, curating for specific audiences, tracking clients and competitors. Someone mentioned that in the chat, very popular use case, particularly for sales and marketing teams who, always want to, when you walk into a client, you don't want them to be telling you, I assume you heard about our merger or acquisition. You want to be on top of that information, being able to have a live briefing that tells you that before you get to see the client and integrate it into your CRM or into your Slack or wherever makes sense. It's very valuable. We talk about articles, but obviously these can also be videos and podcasts. Lots of people have created video or podcast specific briefings to help people stay up to date in different modes of learning. Adding them to formal courses or extending to competencies and behaviors. I was just talking to a client this morning who has a series of core behaviors in the organization that they want everyone to adhere to, creating a briefing that maps to each of those so there's a constant stream of new content around those, adding those to communities and internal social networks, be those ESNs or Jive or Yammer or wherever it might be, and then helping people to curate for themselves. So while, in the use case, the Moodle example that Steve showed earlier, that's an admin integrating that briefing, there's no reason why you can't just say anybody can create these briefings and just do it for themselves as well, for your own personal interests, for whatever you might want to be engaged with. So there's just some examples. I'd love to hear in the chat about other areas you're interested in curating content for, either for yourself or for organizations. There's always new examples and case studies coming through. We'll wrap up shortly and go over to questions, but I just want to say a few things about where we think the whole learning platform and curation is headed and where we think engagement is going to come. A few of these we've mentioned on the way in comments from Josh Burson and others. The invisible LMS, I think, is going to become more of a real thing. So engagement is really more about get what you need, get out again. And so that's about putting content where people want it. And that's embedding it into the workflow. The learning platform doesn't have to be where the learning experience happens. That doesn't have to be the UX. It can be inside Slack. It can be inside another platform if preferred. We're seeing quite a few integrations now into chatbots. So Filtered, who many of you will know, of a great chatbot called Magpie. Otto from Learning Pool, another great chatbot, which is pulling information from effectively a database or learning management system in the background, but bringing it to you in Slack or in a chatbot, pushing content to you. We're working with both of those to look at integrations of AndersPink so that you can have trending content via briefings, via chatbot as well. So you could just have a chatbot say, hey, I know you're interested in big data as it relates to pharmaceuticals. Here's an article I just found. You might find this useful. Pushing that to you so it feels more in the workflow. Be interesting to see how that develops over time. We're seeing a lot more use of chatbots to bring content from the LMS without the LMS being the full experience. Open and integrated, we've talked about this as well. So no one platform needs to do it all and can really do it all. We're seeing more and more integrations with wider HR and talent suites, APIs being the glue that holds the internet together, being the key way of doing that. And we're seeing great new applications coming through like NetX, Teacher Morris, Filtered, Views, Totra, Lumes, HT2, Elucida, all partners of ours, all using the API to integrate and to push content into their platforms without having to build their own curation tools and engines to do it. So for us, it's about playing nicely with all of these partners because there's no one right answer for clients. And we have clients who come to us and say, we'd like to work with you and we'd like to work on our LMS and we'd like to work it in SharePoint. And I think collectively as an industry, our answer has to be, that's fine. Let's make it work. Let's make these systems connect so that there's more fluidity across them. And then finally, a lot of companies, and we hear it a lot, people talking about being the Netflix of learning, the Netflix for learning. I think it's a valid analogy, but I think it's not just about presenting content in a kind of a scrolling tiled fashion. I think we should be trying to be the Netflix for learning in a much more fundamental way, which is to use AI. To use AI to learn from our actions and preferences and to recommend curated and relevant content from different places. So because you watch something on Netflix, it suggests something else for you. It's not always a perfect algorithm. I get strange recommendations all the time, but it gets better over time. Same with Amazon. These are how these platforms have become massively successful. It's learning more about you and serving back content based on your preference. We've built a layer of machine learning into AndersPink, which is allowing us to reflect on your preferences, what content you like or your team like, and look at and share and recommend. We can show you more of that and less of what's less relevant to you. Interesting to see where that goes over time. We're working with a range of partners, as you can see there, to drive more of that personalization and to use machine learning in some interesting ways. We'll be making some announcements around that in the coming months as well. But I think this is helping to change the learning platform, the learning experience platform, to be more machine driven over time. So some directions which is headed. Sorry, Steve, you're going to...
I was going to say, if we have time, I could show later just how the machine learning works on BuzzSumo, but let's just run through. But yeah, it's in simple terms, you just say you want to see more of this or less of this, and the machine learning algorithm learns over time. So you can set up an initial briefing, you get your content coming through, but you want to refine it. And one way to refine it is for you to say, I like this, I don't like this, and then the machine begins to learn. And obviously, the more you do that, the more it learns. So there's a little bit of input required, but you get much better briefings as a consequence. So yeah, that's something that you can use as well within AndersPink.
Yeah, and it's another interesting use case that we've seen around that is one partner has said to us, here's a very large volume of articles that we have written. We want to feed these into your algorithm, and we want you to generate a briefing that matches the tone of these articles and the subjects of these articles, so we can kind of consume content, let the algorithm learn what you think is valuable and relevant, and then provide that content back to you as well. So if you have a library of content and you want to create a briefing that matches it in terms of tone, quality, relevance, etc., we can do that as well. And that's where machine learning really allows us to do that at scale and at speed as well. So some future directions in which we're headed here, but I want to give some time for questions, and I would just, it's always nice to leave on an image of Ralph Fiennes, but this idea of becoming a content curation concierge, whether you're doing it at the Grand Budapest Hotel or in your L&D team, I think there is a lot to that analogy, which is help people find what they want, give it to them where they want it, using technology, whether it's ours or others, to help you do it at scale, so that you're not manually curating content for everyone over time. So a few resources to take away. There's lots more tips on how to generate more engagement using curation and other tools from various experts who've got great things to say about it. There's a link to the blog, which we'll drop into the chat in a moment as well. And we'll open it up to questions. Want to kick it off? One free book. We've got one of those, which goes into a lot more detail on how you can create content for learning, lots of use cases and examples as well. I'll put that link into the blog too, but I'll stop banging on there. And any comments, feedbacks, questions, right?
Well, let me come in there, guys. Firstly, thank you very much. That was fascinating. And while people think about questions and put them into chat, I suppose what I'm quite curious about from the eLearning Network perspective is how, in terms of our audience even today, I wonder where people are at on a spectrum of, this is completely new to me, versus I'm already doing bits of this and this makes complete sense and I can now see how I can go up a level. I wondered how far apart people were, because everybody's good at Google, but then you often get rubbish results back. And I think I posted earlier on, if you don't actually nail your keywords, you're going to get a lot of stuff back that isn't quite what you want. Is that a steep learning curve, getting those terms right?
There's definitely a learning curve to try and get the right sorts of terms right, because you may not just be interested in leadership, you're interested in something specific. I think also one of the ways to ensure quality is to say, actually, we only want to see content from these 50 domains or something like that. So you have 50 domains that you respect. So the problem when you go to Google is you can find content from anywhere and everywhere. And some of it's good, some of it's less good, but you can provide a quality filter in terms of the types of domains. We've curated for people 6,000 business domains, which we think are good. You can use that as a default, but you can just say, we really like these 50, for example. But the other thing you can do is use the machine learning. The machine then starts to learn that actually you do trust articles from these particular sites, from these particular authors. And the more you interact with the machine learning, the more it learns. But a simple way initially is to say, actually, maybe let's just list 50 domains that we really like and start with that. Obviously, the less domains, the less content you see, but the higher quality that you see. So there's a bit of a balance there. So it does take a little bit of time, but not too much time, because once you've set it up, that may take you an hour or two. Once you've set it up, then it runs forever. So that briefing will continually updating.
I suppose this might be a silly question, but it's a little bit retrospective. If you have got a lot of content in your LMS in the form of courses, short or long, can they become can it search within your LMS?
No, we don't really do that. I mean, the focus of AndersPink is really to bring external content in, really. So people already do a good job of building courses, curating content for their internal audience. What people find harder, we think, is there are probably 8 or 9 million articles published today, for example. Which of those should we be reading? I mean, we just don't have time. There's so much content published. There's no way we can even skim through all the blogs, etc. So what we're trying to do is we can find a way of filtering and bringing you content externally in. So we're really focused on that informal learning, the more recency in terms of content. The courses are there already, for example, so we don't really focus on that side. But I don't know if, Stephen, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I noticed a comment from Paul Westlake at Kinea there, and he is making that point that, you know, seeing less content in the briefing probably means it's better. You don't want to read 1,000 articles about big data. You want to read the 5 that intersect with big data as they relate to HR and learning in my sector. So it is about taking that thin slice, and it's about you spending the time reading things that are relevant rather than scanning things that aren't relevant. So, and that's harder to do in Google. You know, you type sales tips into Google, you get 180 million results. You're never going to get off page 1, even though there might be a gem that's further down based on how their ranking works. So yeah, getting better at search and seeking is vital, I think.
Do you want to comment on Heidi's comment about the business not being ready? I don't know whether this relates to the whole concept of informal learning, where, you know, because there's to me there's an issue about people who need to solve an instant problem at work in their day job right now and need a quick fix. But I think maybe what we're talking about here, and obviously widening this out, is that you need to keep yourself up to date, as you said at the beginning. So therefore, you need to appreciate that there must be some time in your day when it's okay for you to read some stuff that you might not need right now, but will help you to understand what you might need to be doing, say, tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and I wonder if the term, and I think we're all guilty of this in this industry, is the word curation just, you know, a difficult one for non-learning people to relate to. And I often just talk about it in terms of, do you believe you need to learn something new every day? And if you do, then we've got ways to help you. And it's almost, you know, addressing it in those terms. And that's why, you know, go back to that example of sales teams. Sales and marketing teams, you know, they read an article about their industry or their competitor or a prospect, and they think, I can use that, I can share that on LinkedIn, or I can, you know, talk to them about it. They're not thinking about, I've curated this and I'm continuously learning. They're just getting on with it. So I think it's about finding the right language to speak to the business in. So it's about putting relevant content into the work.
Yeah, and I think Bursin's language of learning in the flow of work is quite a good phrase, because it relates to the point that Heidi's making. If people say, well, we really focus on courses, and courses are incredibly valuable. Of course, they provide certain types of skills, knowledge, experience, etc. But they're not updated in the same way. And learning in the flow of work is, if you're a salesperson, you probably need to know that your clients had a major catastrophe yesterday or today before you're talking to them, for example. And so it's a way of keeping you updated or informed, or even if it's of course around money laundering and regulations, things change all the time, or there's a new legal case that you might need to be aware of. And so the course is fantastic, providing the core fundamentals, but things keep changing all the time. And I think the danger for all of us, and I always say this, is the danger for all of us is that we become obsolete. Things keep changing. We have to keep learning. We have to keep investing in ourselves. So it's a constant process. And of course, there's one element, but there's the informal learning as well that helps keep us up to date. And increasingly, a lot of us learn through Google, through talking to people, but through that informal side.
Well, we have to walk the talk for everybody else, don't we? If we can't keep ourselves up to date, what hope have they got, really?
That is very true. You know, I think it is one of those things where L&D teams need to kind of attend to their oxygen mask before helping anybody else, which is, you know, create a briefing for yourself, stay up to date on what's happening. It's a fascinating time in digital learning, all of this new conversation around learning experience platforms, APIs. Create a briefing on those subjects. Just make sure you're staying on top of the information on that, and then you can be an example of how it benefits you.
And I think, just to add my comment really there, one of the most powerful things in terms of learning is getting people to reflect. So it isn't, I mean, as you've said already, but just to reinforce, it isn't just about finding them appropriate, relevant, interesting stuff to read, but it's actually that additional step of asking them to reflect, or encouraging them to reflect on it. And then if they go that extra step and say why it matters to them, then that's that third stage in your 3-stage block of adding value to other people. But that reflection is key for the learning piece, because otherwise it's just so much content flowing over you.
I think that's really true. I mean, anyone can kind of flick on a link and say, you know, read this, or just share it on Twitter, etc. I think where you personalize and say, this is what I took from it, this is what I learned from it, and this is why I think it's relevant to you. I think that's where that's where you really add value. And I'm going to I'll show just for 1 second, and then I'll flip back out again. But there's another client of ours, Scania, the truck haulage company, who use it for the same reason, to push it into their API. But they are very active, Lars in particular, in this team, in adding his comments with articles. So anytime he sees an article that's valuable and he thinks it's relevant to the team, he takes the time to add that. Now, does that take him, 30 seconds? Possibly, but he's adding a huge amount of value. He's often doing it in Swedish, so I don't understand what the value is he's adding, but I'm sure it's but that goes with it into their LMS. So they're not just getting a feed of content, they're getting a feed of content with an expert saying, this is why this is valuable for you. And I think someone else said that in the chat as well, as that's really where you add that human layer that really helps you to discern what content is worth reading. And if someone you trust is saying, I think this is excellent, I think the odds that you will take the time to read it go up, substantially, rather than just seeing it in a feed.
Yeah, and I think it's really right. It's those two layers. The first layer is automated because there's just so much content, we can't possibly see everything. We need automated filters to help us. But the next layer is human. People saying, actually, this is valuable. But also, as you say, reflecting on it and writing a comment. I always find the comments really useful.
Yeah, it makes it easier.
So I've put out the evaluation poll because we're getting towards the end of our slot. Still a few minutes left for more questions if people want to add them. But yeah, pleased to say that the vast majority have found this to be extremely and/or very useful. So that's excellent, and it's very timely. And also in terms of what's coming up, interesting to see that 71% of people are interested in AI and chatbots, because we've got a webinar scheduled for later in the year on that, with the guy who did a session on chatbots at Learning Technologies. Just while we ask people to put in any more questions, is it all right if I just move over to the eLN website and just have a quick run through of what's coming up?
Sure.
Just working out where the option is to share my screen.
It's at the bottom. If you just put the screen on the Zoom, we'll scroll down. Yeah.
Not looking at the right thing. So Google Chrome, here we go. So for those who haven't noticed, I'll take my calendar down. The eLN has relaunched its website, and we have a spanking new one, which Toby Harris has been helping us do with an external company. And if you go to that, you will have to, if you're already a member, you'll have to sign in and I think update your password. But if you go to the events page, then you'll see all the stuff that we've got planned for the next few months. So the next face-to-face event is a session in a workshop come unconference, which is a kind of user-generated conference on what makes modern learning great, and that's in Manchester on the 20th of next month. And then we have Ecom Scotland running a webinar for beginners, really. So, how do you get through your first big e-learning project? That's on the 27th. I'm hoping to confirm one on the 20th of July with Joe Cook on virtual classrooms. I'll let you know about that when it comes through. And then we've got one on learning design for the point of work in September. That one is with David James at Loop. So I'm sure that's going to be a really interesting one. And we're already planning our annual conference in November. And again, all these details are on this new website, along with how you sign up, etc. So if you're not a member already, and I did notice that a few people were not, then we hope you will consider joining. The annual membership is only £29 for the whole year and gives you access for free to the regional workshops and obviously these webinars and stuff. And I should just say that all the previous recordings are up on our YouTube channel, which I've already put into the chat if you missed it. But do please sign up to that as well and browse and hopefully find that useful. So I think, any more questions coming in? All right, you've put in your URL, that's handy. Okay, but, well, I think we're more or less there then. I'll stop the poll and share the results. And just let me take another opportunity then to thank both of you for your session today. Very, very interesting, very topical.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the great engagement in the chat. It was good. It's always great to have a conversation rather than just yak on. So it was fantastic to see questions and comments come through.
Okay, so we'll end the meeting there. Oh, sorry, Sue's raised a hand. Where are you, Sue? Sue, do you want to speak? Nope. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Okay, all right, that's it then, folks.
Great. Thanks so much, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine. We'll catch up soon.